Yo, what's up guys, Jack here, and today we're going to be talking about Titanfall. Believe it or not, it's been almost 2 years since Titanfall was released. It really doesn't feel like that long though, but like a lot of other people, I stopped playing Titanfall a long time ago. Not consciously, but I guess I just got a little bored of it and moved on to other games. It just didn't give me the incentive to keep on playing. There were so many good things about Titanfall though, things that I loved, and the game itself was actually pretty damn awesome, so I thought I would talk about why it was great and what Respawn could potentially do to ensure that Titanfall 2 is more successful. There was so much hype around the launch of Titanfall, mainly because the team working on it, Respawn Entertainment, were created from many of the old Call of Duty developers from Infinity Ward, and we all know how successful Call of Duty has become. They were trying to make a game that had the same core elements as Call of Duty, so that's stuff like really fast-paced infantry combat, whilst also throwing their own twist on it, and well, they certainly did that by adding in giant mechs. The game was set in the relatively near future, with humanity living in a region of space known as the Frontier. The movement system here was the real winner though, and that's really what set this game apart. It was just so smooth and fast, and it harked back to old school arcade shooters. You could just move around the map so easily and naturally over objects thanks to the double jump and wall running mechanics. We've actually seen the same thing in the latest Call of Duty game, but honestly, I think Titanfall just did it better. In Titanfall, it just felt crisper and easier. You could easily combine wall running to climbing to wall running again, and then seamlessly end up on top of a friendly or enemy Titan, rodeoing your way around to victory. It was all just so easy, and it looked so awesome. Then we get onto the mechs. If you haven't ever played Titanfall, you also had the ability after a certain amount of time to call in a mech. You had 3 to choose from, with a choice between speed or armor, or one that's in between. You then had this really cool dynamic of players running around, wall running over buildings, and mechs battling themselves at the same time. You could even set your mech to automatic patrol mode and just carry on about your own business if you wanted to. The mech element was just something way different from what we'd seen before, and it just blended in really well with the infantry play. And that was mainly thanks to the good map design. There were actually 15 maps in the game at launch. That's right, 15, which it has to be said is a pretty solid number. Every map seemed to offer something different, and they all offered lots of verticality, and they were all designed with the game's movement system in mind, so you could, if you were good enough, wall run across large portions of the map without ever touching the ground. The floor is lava. But of course it wasn't all good, and now we get onto some of the bad points, and whilst we're talking about the maps, let's cover the negative aspects of them. Whilst they played great and the overall gameplay experience is fantastic, they do all look a bit bland. In fact, the whole art style is a bit grey and washed out, to be truthful. In fact, the graphics in general weren't great, and I know graphics aren't everything, and that was 2 years ago, and it of course wasn't really designed with next gen in mind, and as well as that, it only released on Xbox 360, Xbox One and PC because of an exclusivity deal, which also hampered its possible success. Can you imagine COD only releasing on one of the consoles nowadays? The game was actually made on the Source engine, which you literally never know because it doesn't look anything like a Source game that you've ever seen, and that's mainly thanks to the massive overhaul they gave it. Sure, it's based on Source, but they didn't have to go to town on it and turn it into exactly what they wanted. And I also feel like the maps lacked a bit of destruction. Nowadays, lots of multiplayer FPS games thrive on certain destructive elements of the maps. Yes, for Titanfall it would actually break some of the game mechanics because of the wall running thing, but I feel like they could have thrown in a few destructible environments here and there and still made it work. Unfortunately, the game also suffered from a real lack of variety with the game modes. It was great that we had so many maps to play on, but at launch we only had 5 game modes to play, and well, 2 of them were practically the same. Capture the Flag, Hardpoint, Domination, Attrition, which was TDM, and Pilot Hunter, which was a glorified TDM, and then Last Titan Standing. After some time playing, you soon become a little bit bored with what the game has to offer, and whilst Respawn have done a good job of adding in some extra content throughout Titanfall's life, including a new survival mode, it didn't really help the game when it launched. As well as that, all of the maps and game modes were padded out with AI players. The game itself was limited to 6 versus 6, and that wasn't because it couldn't handle more players, but they had to think, what if every player called in a mech at the same time? That's 12 mechs in total. Imagine then if it was 10v10 or 15v15, all of a sudden things are going to get a bit crazy and the map is going to feel very, very confined. A lot of people didn't like the AI though, although with them the maps would feel very empty. It's quite an odd situation here where the maps have to be large enough to accommodate the mechs, but also with only 6 players on each side, they can feel a bit too big at times. It can be a bit boring playing through 10 minutes of a game, killing things only to realise you only came across one actual real player. As well as a lack of game modes, there was a real lack of customization and chase. Imagine how much they could have done with options to customize your mech with new colours, designs, badges, war scars, or any sort of customization options. Player characters were also very limited, with the only option being to choose between male or female. This is one of the biggest areas they got wrong, I think. Just look at how much customization COD has, and people just can't get enough of it. You can customize just about everything these days, and if Titanfall wants to succeed, it needs to do the same. And going back to the chase of the game, I really felt like you could just unlock almost everything within maybe 10 or 20 hours of gameplay. There just wasn't enough there. And the game didn't have a single player campaign either. To me, that isn't a massive issue because it's a multiplayer game and that's what I'm mainly interested in. But for a lot of people, that was really, really disappointing because this was a full-priced game. Instead, the game offered a sort of multiplayer campaign which was kind of like a small story element mixed in with online multiplayer games. It didn't really do anything though to appease people and it felt a bit half-hearted. You'd end up joining games halfway through the campaign and be a bit confused. In fact, the whole background of the game is never really explained properly in-game, and it just makes you a lot less invested in the game's characters and story. You just don't really care. Don't get me started on the auto pistol. Yes, it's cool, but that is one of the silliest items I've ever seen in a video game, even if the game is set in the future. Looking back on Titanfall, I think it was a fantastic game, but there just wasn't enough there for most people and some elements of it weren't explored correctly. The gameplay was great, the movement was sharp and the Titans added something new and fresh. Unfortunately, a lack of content and game modes ultimately let it down in the short term, and I even think that giving people so much access to the game in the beta probably burnt them out by the time launch arrived. We now know that the next Titanfall game is in development by Respawn and they've been working on it since 2014 when the first game shipped, so a good 2 years now. And this game is due to launch in EA's fiscal 2017 year, so basically any time between now and the end of March 2017. Having said that, something interesting was leaked recently by a toy company, of all things. McFarlane Toys are a toy company who will be making Titanfall 2 figures, and thanks to a release by the company, they claimed that the figures and the next Titanfall would release this winter. EA of course responded and said that they haven't released a date yet, so take it all with a pinch of salt, but we could be seeing the next Titanfall later this year. And when that game does launch, I think it needs way more than 5 game modes to start with. There are some really interesting game modes that they added into the game down the line. Deadly Ground has electrified fog over the ground, and because of that you need to stay up and off the ground. It works quite well alongside other modes to add a new twist, and I think really they need more game modes like that in the next game. Customization, also something that they cannot neglect. Gun customization, both with attachments and visual, as well as player customization, and more importantly, mech customization. They really missed out with that one. I want to be able to completely change the look of my fighting machine to my liking, within reason of course. I'd also love to see a solution to the AI in the game, maybe adding in more players but restricting the amount of mechs that can be in at any one time, but again that throws up a few problems. I know this isn't ideal and people would feel a bit annoyed that they had a mech available and couldn't call it in, but I think a solution needs to be found to have more than 6 players on a team in a game without the need for AI. We already know there will be a single player campaign for Titanfall 2. I'm actually really interested to see where they go with this and the style that they do it in. The story of Titanfall was never told in the first game, so they've got plenty of content to cover, but after playing the original game, it throws up an interesting universe that could potentially hold some excellent story content. Not only that, but apparently they're also releasing a new TV show based in the Titanfall universe at the same time as Titanfall 2, so if we didn't get enough of the Titanfall story last time, we definitely will this time around. And there we have it. That's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on Titanfall and Titanfall 2 down in the comments below. Where can they take the series and what could they do to really make this a solid franchise? As always, thank you so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, a thumbs down if you didn't, and I'll see you in the next one.